All right, this is Gary Parr with Fiber Talk, and I'm here with Nicola Parkman, Hands Across the Sea sampler, with a band sampler,
Yes.
Bathya 1680, circa
Around
1660.
1680, yes, yes.
Now this is a reversible band sampler.
It is.
This is, I have to say, the first time I was exposed to reversible band samplers as you were showing little segments as you stitched them.
That's right.
Absolutely stunning to me how you do this, because
Yes.
front and back, just as enjoyable.
Absolutely. It was this.
Yeah.
This was a joy to stitch. It really, really was. And we have here.
A teaching piece. We need to make sure that people understand. A teaching piece that you'll start teaching in November at.
The first class, I'm going to be teaching this sampler only on 3 occasions. The first time will be in November at Fobbles in Cumbria, in England. And I really wanted to teach this for the first time in England because I'm English, the sampler is English, and so often in England we miss out on such events. So the first class was heavily oversubscribed, so we're doing a back-to-back workshop, and I know that there are a handful of places. So if anybody is in England or Europe and they want to attend, contact Beverly at Fobbles and grab those places. Then I will be teaching her.
And it's okay for us to fly from the U.S. to take the class, right?
Well, people fly from England to the US.
It's been known to happen.
No, but you don't have to, because I'm coming to the US to teach this at the end of May, beginning of June of next year, and I will be teaching this back to back between Sassy Jacks Stitchery, where we are at the moment, and at the Attic in Mesa, Arizona, and that's the only time I will be teaching this in the States. Okay, so it's either England in November or the States next year.
Next year. Okay.
Yes, yes.
All right, now Bathya, let's move over to the
actual sampler.
actual sampler. Bathya, an unusual name.
It is, and when I investigated it, it turned out to be a Hebrew name. But I was really very surprised that when I started to look at Bathyas on the family history sites, that there were quite a few Bathyas in the 16 and 1700s.
Oh.
And I actually found a Bathya that was down in Cornwall, where I lived, and I actually found a Bathya in the South Wales valleys, which is where I was born, in a little mining village.
Yeah.
And her father had a Hebrew name and a Hebrew surname. So it's very, very interesting. But unfortunately, there's not enough in the sampler for us to pinpoint our Bathya, which is such a shame. But we know that Bathya, and she starts to give part of her surname, but she literally runs out of space and stops, so it's Wormo. So
Kids these days, they can't space anything.
No, wrought this.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that she used a V instead of the U, which was common practice. The V and the U were used, it was all subject to the position of where the letter was in the word. There's no date on the sampler, but the reason I believe that this sampler is around 1680 is because of this sampler, which is one of the Goodhart samplers, and it was stitched by Anna Perrin in 1681. And if you look at this band, Gary, you can see this band replicated here on Bathya's sampler.
I get both.
Can you see
There
it
we go,
here?
yes.
Okay, and what you'll see that these pineapples, Bathya stitched in eyelet and Anna stitched in satin stitch. But this is very clearly the same band, but different use of colours. You can see that, that is the same.
Yes.
Okay, you can
They
see.
just get down.
You can
Yeah.
see this is here. You can see the very unique shape of these leaves is here. Then you see these little, these are upright Italian stitches, and they're here.
There they are right there.
They're
Yep.
there right there. So I'm dating this sampler circa 1680, because we know that Anna stitched hers in 1681.
And not unusual for those different motifs to be used by.
There could be a few decades,
Right.
but it's an indication
Right.
of when this might be stitched. And another indication to me that this was in the latter half of the 1600s were these two sunflowers. Now, the sunflower is a representation of royalty. And Charles I was known as the Sun King before Louis XIV of France was given that title. And of course, the flower follows the sun, and it's a symbol of loyalty, longevity, and royalty. And you'll notice this sunflower has no seeds.
Yes, notice that. Yes.
Now, I have studied every single stitch that Bathya has made, and I know that Bathya was a meticulous needleworker. There is no evidence on the original sampler that this is thread loss. That was never stitched. And I think that this sunflower was deliberately left empty to represent Catherine of Braganza, the wife of Charles II, who was barren. And that will also fit into the sort of mid half of the latter half
right,
of the century.
right.
So, yeah.
Interesting to be able to
Yes, I think
reach
so.
those kinds of conclusions.
Yeah, well, I think that when you study samplers will give you little hints about what was in the little girl's mind. Like, we know that acorns are a symbol of royalty, and this sampler has many, many acorns right the way through the sampler.
It's just full
of acorns. And acorns were associated with Charles II after he fled the Battle of Worcester in 1651 because he hid in an oak tree.
Oh, it's not because he was a nut. It's because...
No, he hid in the Boscobel oak.
Oh, okay.
It just became associated with him and royalty. And all these little symbols relate to the fact that this girl's family was loyal to the crown,
Yes.
I believe. And we also have pineapples, and pineapples are associated with kings.
Yes.
So,
Those are beautiful with the eyelets.
they are, aren't they? And of course, the beautiful thing about Bathya's sampler is that she is totally reversible.
No, it's not just beautiful. It's amazing that it is equally beautiful this way around, and you really can't tell. I mean,
Now-
other than the letters are backwards, but
That's right. Now,
you really can't tell.
this band was stitched with double back stitch and diagonal double back stitch. From the front, it's plaited, but from the back, it's a double row of back stitch. And the one thing that Bathya did, she went wrong with the twists of her ribbons.
Oh,
So when you look at the front, her ribbons don't twist properly, and it's so tempting that when you stitch something, you correct
to fix it, yeah.
But I haven't corrected it. But before this is finally framed, after I've taught it, I plan to unpick it and correct it.
Are you really?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
because that will drive me mad looking at that. But for the reproduction, it had to be reduced
Right.
exactly as she stitched it. But it's so, so beautiful. It really is.
and she left the element there on the far right, not repeated on the left here.
That's right. But you'll see that a lot in band samplers.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I just really, this band, so delicate, and I really like the line work. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now this is marking stitch. It's a cross stitch at the front, and at the back it's a four-sided stitch. This stitch is alternating double back stitch, and it's stitched in groups of three, which three represents the Trinity. This sampler is a mix of being stitched over 2 and over 3, whereas the other band sampler we've reproduced, MH, is entirely stitched over 3.
So pay attention here when you're stitching.
Yes, it alternates between 2 and 3, but in the graph when I have my notes, my annotation notes on the graph pages, I highlight over 2 and over 3. Now,
But don't get cocky and just start stitching because you'll.
no, always
Yeah.
read what's
Yeah,
there. Now this band is, again, it's marking stitch, it's reversible cross stitch. It appears as a cross stitch on the front and a cross stitch on the back. Now, so this is the back of the sampler. Now on this band, this is the back, and these acorns are outlined in double running stitch, filled in with satin stitch, and the reason that this is blank on the back is because we use detached buttonhole to stitch the acorn cups, and it's called detached because it doesn't go through the fabric. It's attached by stitching it into the double running stitch. It never pierces the actual linen. All right. So that's why it doesn't appear
Right,
on the
it is,
back.
Yeah.
Okay. So this band, I think,
This band
is
is
just
special.
so beautiful.
It really is.
It really is. And at this stage, it might be an idea for us just to stop and have a little look at the graph. Now, the graph hasn't been printed yet, but just before I left to come to the States, the printer's proof arrived. And the Thiers band runs over 3 pages. So this is the left-hand side of the sampler band.
Yeah, you can
This
see
is
the sunflower there.
That's right.
Without the seeds.
and this is the middle.
Yep.
And then this is the right-hand side. And what I've done, because it's reversible, as every band has a photograph showing the band from the front and the band
So
from
every
the back.
band in the book, you have a
all
photo
the way
showing both
all
sides.
the way through. There's
Okay.
photos broken down so that you can really study it, because I believe a photograph speaks 1,000 words, and if you can visually see in detail what you're aiming to achieve, it really helps you
Sure.
with that. So that's all the way through.
Sure. And nice, large, sharp photos.
Oh,
So you can
absolutely.
really study them and see
That's
what
right.
it is.
And
Yes.
when you look at the graph as well, that really is very, very
Yes.
clear. And here's the pineapple.
Yes.
Okay, and this is the start. And of course, we indicate here, that is detached buttonhole stitch. And we give the colours in the DMC and the AVAS. And this is double running stitch over 3. And we
Pay
give
attention.
the colours. Okay, then
Well,
this
and
is our
that's
satin
something that
stitch.
people need to be aware of in your charts, is you really do make it quite clear.
Absolutely.
Especially if there's an aberration or something unusual.
That's right.
You really call it out so people don't get tripped up and have to rip something out.
That
Yeah.
is so important to us, and we're trying to make our charts as clear as possible, because the easier they are to follow, the more joy our stitchers will have working
Right.
on them. And what we try and do is show all the stitches, like I'm showing you how to move around
Yes.
here, and the satin stitched areas of the sunflower.
Yes.
Okay, and then what we have in our charts, as we've discussed before, is the centerfold spread. Now, because this is the printer's proof, it comes like this, but obviously when the booklet is printed, that is one
Yep.
large sheet of paper.
Right. Will we have the bookmark this time?
Yes,
Bookmark every time now.
every time. I've actually got the proof of the bookmark.
Very popular.
Yes,
Very popular.
so there we have it.
That's one of those just pin up on the wall while you're stitching.
Yeah.
This is where you're
Now, the Bathya, when she was stitching, let's just work it out now. Let me get my bearing here. She squished her stitches in. So what I've done, I've shown them exactly as she stitched them. And I've put the distorted stitches are not an error. This is exactly how Bathya laid her stitches.
Not me, it's her.
No. So that was a little bit challenging charting.
sure.
But stitching it was fine, because you were just following exactly You can just see.
Oh, I can't imagine
Yeah.
trying to chart that.
Yeah. It was really interesting. I really felt myself connecting with her, spending so long under magnification
Yeah,
studying
yeah.
her, and it was a joy.
Yeah.
So, and what I have here, Gary, coming to Sassy Jacks because of insurance purposes, I couldn't bring the original Bathya with me. But in the chart, there is a picture of the original Bathya, and this sampler featured in a TV program, and you can go on YouTube and you can see when this was featured. And also, she's in a lot of reference books. This sampler has a remarkable history, a very interesting history, and you can see the colours. These are the colours that we've reproduced here, and the reason the colours are so vivid is that this sampler was confiscated by the Nazis when they occupied Austria, and it went into the Kunstgewerbe Museum, which is now the MAC, and it was stored in a bank vault or a vault in the museum.
So that's why it's so beautifully.
That's right.
preserved.
It just didn't see
Never saw it.
daylight.
Yeah.
And then when Austria introduced, restitution laws where the descendants of the original owners could reclaim their property, Emma Henriette's textile collection was returned to her descendants, and they put it up for sale. And most of the samplers in this collection, they went into museums throughout the world, and I feel very, very blessed that my husband got this sampler for me. It took me 18 months of persuasion.
Thus not traveling with it.
No, but it's just such a beautiful sampler. If we carry on down looking at these bands, the colours, they're just like jewels.
They are.
They are. You've got the rubies, you've got
Going
the
to my
emeralds.
knees here, folks.
Yeah. You've got the rubies, you've got the emeralds, the sapphires.
Yep.
It's just such a beautiful sampler.
Yep. Just going to explore a little bit here. Take a break, Nicola. What fun to stitch.
Oh, it was absolutely wonderful. And do you know what the trick with stitching reversibly? The stitches themselves are naturally reversible. So you don't have to worry about that. The issue is, where do you start and end your threads so that you can hide them? So before you start each band or each row, you have to work out beforehand your stopping and starting points. Okay, and then once you've worked that out, it becomes very, very easy to understand what you're trying to achieve.
That's what she says, folks.
No, it really is. And when I teach this sampler, it will be taught by a series of videos, which, because I like visual things to learn. Should I just turn that round while you're down there?
Turn around all you want.
And, you should always have a go. Until you have a go, you do not know what you can achieve. I had never stitched a reversible sampler until I stitched Bathya.
This was your first
My
one?
first reversible sampler. I've stitched a reversible blackwork sampler before, but never something like this. And it was a joy. It was an absolute joy. And if I can do it, somebody else can do it as well, when they know how.
Yep.
And I was so grateful to Darlene Osteen and her book, The Proper Stitch. The Proper Stitch.
That was the tool, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Darlene Osteen, I just have so much to be grateful to her for.
And you stitched this on 40 count?
No, this is stitched on 36 count
36.
because that is what Bathya stitched her sampler on. If you just bear with me a second.
Yep.
I'll
Take your
give
time.
you-
We'll just
I
look at the
shall-
sampler here.
I shall give you the measurements.
It's fine. No trouble studying the sampler while you get papers out. I love white thread.
Isn't the
on
white
anything.
work beautiful?
So gorgeous. This band right here is that's the one. Yes, love that.
Where is my back page that answers what I want? This is the trouble. When you have a printer's proof, it's all, it's not...
Hang in there, folks. She's going through printer's proofs. She'll find it. It's here. We know it is. Just hang in there.
I hope it's here. I hope I haven't lost it.
And again, the acorn cups. That was detached what?
Detached buttonhole
Buttonhole
stitch.
stitch, yes.
Right,
Okay.
now I need my glasses to
All right.
read the chart. Let's have a look.
Folks, behind the scenes, it's a fascinating little thing that Nicola's doing here. She's all ready now.
I'm ready. Okay, the original sampler was 7.5 inches by 26.5 inches. And so that's 7.5 compared to 7.78. So it's only a quarter of an inch difference on the width. And the length is 26.5, and on 36 count it's 27.22. So it's 3/4 of an inch longer. So you can see 36 count was the right linen to use.
That's what you get, yeah.
Yes.
Close to you get. Well, this is just tremendous. So, starting in November in England, we're
At
teaching
Fobbles,
this. At
Cumbria.
Fobbles. Who is the owner of that shop?
Beverly Trembath, and she
Yes.
is an absolute angel.
Yes.
We're so blessed to have her. She's very much like Jean and Kimberly. Her heart and soul is in her business, and she does so much good for needlework in the UK.
So that's where we're going to start, and
Yes.
then next spring, 2019, in
Well, end of May, beginning of June.
we'll count that as spring.
Okay, and I'll
Then
just...
you'll be at Sassy Jacks and at the Attic.
That's
teaching.
right, back to back. And both Kim and Jean are taking names. We're expecting the workshops to be very heavily, oversubscribed. So I would say to people, if you're interested, you really ought to put your name down, because I don't want to teach with huge numbers in a class. When you come to one of my workshops, I want it to be manageable numbers so that everybody feels that they're getting time with me.
Right.
So, and I can only be in the States for so long. If we just run through the stitches, because I'm sure that people would be interested.
Okay.
The stitches include two different...
Oh, then I'll just show more of the sampler while you talk.
Okay, the stitches include two different versions of reversible cross stitch. One forms a cross on the reverse with a vertical stitch on the left, and the other a four-sided stitch on the reverse. The Bathya also used double backstitch and diagonal double backstitch. These stitches appear plaited from the front and as two parallel rows of backstitch on the reverse. Other stitches used were stem stitch, double-sided Italian stitch, alternating double backstitch in groups of 3, detached buttonhole stitch, French knots, four-sided stitch, satin stitch, eyelet stitch, running stitch. So that's a really nice assortment of stitches to come and learn and master.
Great.
And then at the end of it, you have this
You
very,
have
very
this.
beautiful,
At the end, you
unique
have
sampler.
this,
Yes.
All right, Nicola, thanks so much. This has been a
You
great
are
one.
so welcome,
All right,
Gary.
thank you.
Bye-bye.